At a destination wedding, I walked down to the beach at midnight where a man with a mysterious smile waited. "Are you sure?" he asked softly. I nodded, knowing exactly who would find out. The next morning, a bridesmaid showed me a screenshot of a message that had just gone viral, a photo of me in his arms, captioned, "Looks like someone's done pretending." I just sipped my coffee and waited for the fallout. I was at a destination wedding in Cancun. The kind where everything is picture perfect, the kind where the bride's dress costs more than my car, and the ocean is so blue it doesn't look real. I was here as a guest, not a bridesmaid, but still close enough to the couple that people knew who I was. The bride, Lauren, was one of my oldest friends. The groom, Adam, was the kind of guy you dated in college, not the kind you married. He had that effortless charm, the kind that made you ignore the red flags. And there were red flags. I wasn't the only one who noticed. At the rehearsal dinner, I caught one of the bridesmaids, Rachel, watching Adam too closely. Not in a "he looks nice in that suit" kind of way. More like "I wonder if he's going to keep my secret" kind of way. I pushed the thought away. Not my business. Then came the wedding day. It was stunning as expected. White sand, perfect weather, candles glowing as the sun set. Lauren looked radiant. Adam looked like a man who knew how to play his role. I sat through the vows, watched the way he held her hands, kissed her like he meant it. If I hadn't seen the look on Rachel's face the night before, I might have believed it. The reception was at an open-air venue right on the beach. Champagne flowed, people danced, music played. I drank just enough to feel a little light, but not enough to lose control. Somewhere between the toasts and the cake cutting, I noticed Adam slipping away. A few minutes later, Rachel was gone, too. I stood up, stretched, acted like I was heading to the bar. But instead, I walked in the direction they'd gone. It wasn't hard to find them. A dark corner by the edge of the venue, near the palm trees. They were close, not kissing, but talking in that low, urgent way that people do when they think no one is watching. I didn't stick around. I went back to my table, drank my champagne, smiled when Lauren left. Later that night, after too many drinks and too much pretending, I went for a walk on the beach. The wedding had wrapped up, but a few guests were still lingering. I walked past them, all the way down to where the beach stretched into quiet darkness. And that's where I saw him. Not Adam. Not someone from the wedding. A man I hadn't seen in years. Drew. He was sitting on a rock, watching the waves. And when he saw me, he smiled. That slow, knowing smile that sent something sharp and familiar through my chest. We had history. The kind you don't talk about, the kind that makes your stomach tighten when you see the person again. He didn't say anything at first, just studied me, like he was trying to figure out why I was there. And then he said, "Are you sure?" Soft, like he already knew the answer. I didn't hesitate. I nodded. Because I knew exactly who would find out. The next morning, I woke up to a knock on my door. I wasn't hungover. I wasn't even tired. I had barely slept, but I felt steady. Like my body already knew what was coming. It was Rachel. She didn't say anything, just held out her phone. A screenshot. A message that had just gone viral. A photo of me, in Drew's arms, my face turned toward him, my expression unmistakable. The caption, "Looks like someone's done pretending." I took the phone from her, scrolled through the comments. Some people had already figured it out. Others were asking questions. And Lauren hadn't responded yet. Rachel was watching me, waiting for me to panic, to deny, to make excuses. I just handed her phone back and poured myself a cup of coffee. Then I sat down, took a slow sip, and waited for the fallout. Rachel didn't leave. She just stood there, arms crossed, waiting for me to react. When I didn't, she scoffed. "You don't even care, do you?" she said, shaking her head. I shrugged and took another sip of coffee. "Not in the way you want me to." Her jaw tightened. "Lauren's going to see this any second now." I nodded. "I know." Rachel stared at me like I was someone she couldn't quite recognize. Then she turned on her heel and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I sat there for a minute, listening to the sounds of the resort waking up. The distant hum of ocean waves, the chatter of early risers heading to breakfast, the occasional laughter from another room. Normal sounds. Like nothing had just cracked open. Then my phone buzzed. "Lauren, where are you?" I let out a slow breath, then typed back, "My room." I didn't have to wait long. A few minutes later, another knock. I opened the door to find Lauren standing there barefoot, in one of those hotel robes that always seemed too big. She wasn't crying. Her expression was unreadable. "Can I come in?" she asked, voice steady. I stepped aside. She walked past me, sat down in the chair by the window. I shut the door, leaned against it, waiting. She held up her phone. "This is real." I nodded. She stared at the screen for a long moment, then set it on the table. "Drew." "Yeah." She let out a short, humorless laugh. "I haven't heard his name in years." I sat across from her. Didn't think you would. Lauren leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. How long? I knew what she was asking, but I shook my head. Last night. Before that? Years. She studied me, searching for something. And you knew this would get out? I nodded. Of course. Lauren looked away, out the window, toward the ocean. For a while, she didn't say anything. I let the silence settle. Then she spoke. I can't even be mad at you. I blinked. That was not what I expected. She turned back to me, her eyes sharp. Because I knew about Adam. And I said yes anyway. Something inside me twisted. How long? I asked. She smiled, but it was the kind that didn't reach her eyes. Before we even got engaged. I leaned back, exhaling. Lauren rubbed her temples. It was easier to pretend. Easier to tell myself that as long as I ignored it, it didn't matter. She laughed again, shaking her head. And then you went and did something I never had the guts to do. I watched her carefully. What now? She straightened, pulled the robe tighter around her. Now? I need to talk to Adam. And you? She picked up her phone, stared at the screen. You need to figure out what you want. She stood up, walking to the door. Before she left, she glanced over her shoulder. I think you already know. Then she was gone. I sat there for a long time, staring at the spot where she had been. Then my phone buzzed again. Drew, morning. I ran a hand through my hair. I wasn't sure if I was ready for this conversation, but I had a feeling it was coming whether I was ready or not. I stared at Drew's message for a long time. I didn't reply. Instead, I set my phone down and tried to process everything. Lauren's reaction wasn't what I had expected. She had known about Adam. She had chosen to marry him anyway. And now I had blown up her carefully built illusion without even meaning to. Another buzz. Drew, I'm at the beach. If you want to talk. I wasn't sure if I wanted to. But my feet were already moving. I found him exactly where I had left him last night, sitting on the same rock, staring at the waves like he had all the time in the world. You don't answer texts now, he said, smirking as I approached. I crossed my arms. Did you take that picture? He raised an eyebrow. No, but I knew someone would. I swallowed hard. You wanted this to happen. Drew shrugged, watching me carefully. I didn't stop it. I sat down next to him, my heartbeat picking up. Why are you here? You know why. I exhaled. Drew, he cut me off. No, listen. You walked down here last night knowing exactly what would happen. And I need you to admit it. I clenched my jaw. So what? You think this was some grand act of rebellion? That I did this to make a statement? He shook his head. I think you did it because you're done lying to yourself. I hated that he was right. I hated even more that I had spent so many years trying to forget what he used to mean to me. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but was cut off by the sound of someone calling my name. I turned. Adam. Shit. Adam looked like hell. His tie was gone, his dress shirt unbuttoned at the top, dark circles under his eyes. He wasn't the polished, smooth-talking guy everyone always saw. Right now, he just looked desperate. He marched up to us, barely sparing Drew a glance. His eyes were locked on me. We need to talk. I crossed my arms. About what? His jaw tightened. Are you serious? He exhaled sharply, raking a hand through his hair. Do you know what you've done? I laughed. I actually laughed. What I've done. I gestured between him and Drew. You're the one sneaking off with Rachel during your own wedding reception, and I'm the problem? Adam flinched, his expression darkening. That's different. I scoffed. No, Adam. It's really not. He lowered his voice. Lauren is devastated. Something inside me twisted. She already knew about you. That shut him up. I watched as the realization sank in, as the color drained from his face. How long? He finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Before the engagement, I said, my tone sharp. She knew, Adam. And she still walked down that aisle. Adam took a step back like I had physically hit him. He shook his head, laughing bitterly. You're lying. I shrugged. Believe what you want. He stared at me for a long moment, his eyes flicking toward Drew, then back to me. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. I sat back down, exhaling. Drew let out a low whistle. Well, that was fun. I shot him a glare. Shut up. He smirked. For what it's worth, I'm glad you finally said it out loud. I ignored that, staring out at the waves. Somewhere behind me, this whole wedding was unraveling. The illusion was breaking. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. I sat on that rock with Drew for what felt like hours, listening to the waves, letting everything settle. But the peace was temporary. It was always temporary. I heard my name again, sharper this time. Lauren. I turned and saw her standing there, barefoot in the sand, still in her robe, her hair messy like she hadn't slept. But it was her expression that made my stomach tighten. She looked calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that only comes before something shatters. Drew exhaled. I'll give you 2 minutes. He stood and walked a few steps away, but not far enough to be out of earshot. Lauren crossed her arms. So, did you get it out of your system? I frowned. What? She tilted her head, watching me like I was someone she didn't recognize. Whatever that was. That thing you had to do. Did it fix something for you? I swallowed. Lauren, she held up a hand. No, don't. Just answer me. I hesitated, then said the only thing that felt true. I don't know. Lauren let out a bitter laugh. God, you are so much like him. That hit harder than I expected. She shook her head. Do you even realize what you've done? I straightened. Lauren, you didn't what? She snapped, eyes flashing. You didn't know someone would take a picture? You didn't think it would get out? Or did you just not care? I clenched my jaw. That's not fair. Lauren's face twisted. Not fair? You think any of this is fair? Silence stretched between us. Then she exhaled sharply, shaking her head. You should have told me. About Drew. About how you felt. About any of it. But instead, you let me wake up to a screenshot of my best friend in another man's arms on my wedding night. I winced. She let out a sharp breath, then looked past me, toward Drew. And you. Drew raised his hand slightly, as if to say don't drag me into this. But she did anyway. This is what you wanted, isn't it? She said. You waited for the right moment, just like you always do. You saw your chance, and you took it. Drew's jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. Lauren turned back to me. I thought I knew you. Her voice was quieter now, but somehow it was worse than the yelling. I felt something crack in my chest. I didn't mean to hurt you. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Yeah, neither did Adam. And then she walked away. The fallout was immediate. By the time I got back to my room, the group chat was already in flames. Rachel, what the actual hell? Bridesmaid number 1, are you serious? Bridesmaid number 2, you couldn't wait until after the wedding? Random guest. Damn, this is messy. I scrolled through the messages, reading each one like they weren't about me. And then, Adam, you happy now? I stared at the screen for a long time before typing. Me, are you? He didn't answer. I spent the rest of the day avoiding people. Avoiding everything. Drew knocked once, but I didn't answer. Lauren didn't text. By sunset, I was restless. I walked the length of the beach, trying to get my head right. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lauren's face. The exhaustion. The hurt. I had always told myself I wasn't like Adam. That I wasn't selfish like he was. But standing here, alone on this perfect beach, I wasn't so sure. The next morning, I was packing when my door opened. Lauren. She leaned against the frame, arms crossed, looking at me with something like exhaustion. I should hate you, she said. I swallowed hard. Yeah. She let out a long breath. But I don't. I looked at her, unsure what to say. She shifted, looking at the floor. I'm leaving him. I exhaled. Good. She met my eyes. I don't think I would have if you hadn't, she trailed off, shaking her head. I don't know. Maybe I needed it to happen like this. I wanted to apologize again, but it wouldn't change anything. Lauren sighed. I don't know what happens next. With us. With any of it. I nodded. Me neither. She studied me for a moment. Are you staying? I thought about it. About Drew. About everything. Then I shook my head. No, Lauren nodded once. Good. She didn't hug me. Didn't say goodbye. Just walked out the door. At the airport, I got another text. Drew. So that's it? I stared at it for a long time before finally typing back. Me, yeah. I think so. I turned my phone off before he could respond. Then I boarded my flight, leaving Cancun behind. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't pretending anymore.